The cold asphalt of the parking lot was a mirror, reflecting the rain-slicked neon glow of the city's underbelly. It wasn't the kind of place you'd expect to find hope, but for Maya, hope was a commodity she bartered for with every exhausted breath. Her hands, calloused and chapped, gripped a damp takeout bag as she sprinted toward her battered Honda Civic. The car was a rust-eaten testament to her life, a patchwork of makeshift fixes and delayed maintenance. She slid inside, the scent of stale air freshener and old French fries a familiar comfort. Her phone screen flickered to life, the time 11:58 p.m., just 2 minutes before her daughter's 11th birthday. A single tear, hot and heavy, traced a path through the grime on her cheek. That morning had been a brutal reminder of the world's quiet cruelty. A customer at the laundromat had made a snide comment about her ethnic hair, suggesting she should at least try to look presentable if she wanted a tip. The words, sharp as shards of glass, had pricked at a wound that never truly healed. It was a wound inflicted by 1,000 microaggressions, a constant low-grade fever of being judged not by her actions, but by the color of her skin. She had swallowed her pride, forced a tight smile, and scrubbed the floors until her knees ached. Now, with the city lights blurring into streaks of gold and red, her mind drifted back to a different kind of light. A memory, crisp and cinematic, flashed behind her eyes. A sun-drenched auditorium, the triumphant swell of graduation music, and the proud, beaming face of her father as she crossed the stage to accept her master's degree in engineering. He had told her that day, "Your mind is a key, Maya. It can unlock any door. Don't ever let anyone tell you it's not the right key for their lock." That key, she thought, felt rusty now. It had been gathering dust in the back pocket of her worn jeans, replaced by the keys to a delivery car, a cleaning supply closet, and a laundromat. She wiped her eyes, started the car, and pulled out into the deserted street, her heart a fragile, fluttering bird in her chest. The rain intensified, a rhythmic drumming against the windshield, mirroring the frantic beat of her own exhaustion. She was running on fumes, a single mother held together by sheer will and the fierce, unyielding love for her daughter. The reunion was tomorrow. She dreaded it more than anything, a return to a past she had worked so hard to outrun. But she had to go. For her daughter. For a glimmer of a future she hadn't yet been able to grasp. The next evening, the grand ballroom of the Omni Hotel was a dazzling spectacle of crystal chandeliers and whispered opulence. Maya stood near the periphery, a ghost in a borrowed dress, feeling every bit the imposter. The dress, a simple black sheath, was a stark contrast to the shimmering gowns and tailored suits that swirled around her. It was a gift from a friend, a kindness Maya hadn't had the heart to refuse. She clung to a plastic cup of lukewarm punch, a flimsy shield against the tidal wave of nostalgia and anxiety. This wasn't just a reunion, it was a performance, a showcase of who had made it and who hadn't. She spotted him across the room, the source of her dread. Mark, her ex-husband, held court by the bar, a caricature of his former self. His boyish charm had curdled into an arrogant swagger, his lean frame now padded with the soft prosperity of a successful career. He was surrounded by their old classmates, the same faces who had once dismissed Maya's intellectual pursuits with patronizing smiles and backhanded compliments. He was laughing, a loud, booming sound that sliced through the genteel murmur of the crowd. He hadn't seen her yet. The sight of him brought a rush of memories, not just of their brief, failed marriage, but of the countless subtle ways he had chipped away at her. He had always seen her brilliance as a threat, a challenge to his own perceived superiority. He would belittle her ideas, call her ambitions cute, and chalk up her successes to affirmative action. He'd even gone so far as to tell her that her exotic look was the only reason she had ever been considered for her master's program. When their daughter was born, his resentment had festered, poisoning their home until he finally left, claiming he couldn't handle the pressure of a woman who was too much, too smart, too complicated. He hadn't even looked back. Suddenly, a voice cut through her thoughts. Well, 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 if it isn't the ghost of my past. Mark stood before her, a smug grin plastered on his face. I heard you were coming. Didn't think you'd actually show up. Mark, Maya said, her voice a calm she didn't feel. It's been a long time indeed, he sneered, his eyes raking over her dress. Looks like time hasn't been too kind. Still working those late-night shifts, I see. I told you that engineering degree was a waste. You were always better suited for something, less demanding, like being a homemaker or a maid. What is it? You do now? Besides ruin our daughter's life by raising her in poverty? The words were a direct hit. She flinched, not from the venom, but from the searing pain of his casual cruelty. He was an architect of humiliation, and this was his masterpiece. The surrounding chatter seemed to dim, replaced by the ringing in her ears. She felt 1,000 eyes on her, judging, confirming his cruel assessment. Her face burned with shame. Maya, you know, it's not too late, he continued, leaning in conspiratorially. You could always come work for me. I've got a cleaning service. You could use a reliable hand. I'm sure you could get promoted to supervisor in no time. Think of it as a fresh start. You could even earn some decent money to get rid of that rust bucket you call a car. I wouldn't want our daughter to be embarrassed by her mother's poverty. His offer wasn't a gesture of goodwill. It was a punchline. He was offering her a job as a subordinate in a field he had once mocked her for. The implicit racism of his words, the way he tied her perceived failure to her identity, was a suffocating blanket. It was the less demanding job he had always envisioned for her, a final public validation of his prejudiced worldview. Tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of him. Her silence was her last vestige of dignity. Just then, a hush fell over the room. The CEO of the multinational tech giant, Omnicorp, a titan of industry named Mr. Alistair Finch, stepped onto a raised platform. He was a silver-haired man with a stern but kind face, a legend in the world of technology and finance, the very company Mark worked for. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for, the announcement of the anonymous investor who had saved Omnicorp from a hostile takeover. Mark, who was still smirking at Maya, stood up a little straighter, his chest puffed out. He had told anyone who would listen that his company was saved, and he was sure to get a promotion from it. Good evening, everyone, Mr. Finch's voice boomed. I'm sure you're all wondering who the brilliant mind is who invested in us when no one else would. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. A wave of hushed anticipation rippled through the crowd. Maya, lost in her own humiliation, barely registered the words. She just wanted to disappear. The spotlight was now on Mr. Finch, and in a few moments, the attention would shift to the anonymous investor. Would Mark rub it in her face even more? Would he use this opportunity to gloat about his success? She just wanted to find the nearest exit. The suspense was a palpable, suffocating force. The hum of conversation had dropped to a pin-drop silence, the air thick with anticipation. The crystal chandeliers overhead seemed to hold their breath, casting a dazzling but cold light that glittered off expensive jewelry and polished shoes. Mr. Alastair Finch stood at the lectern, his presence commanding the space with the silent authority of a king. His gaze swept over the sea of faces, and for a fleeting moment, his eyes landed on Maya. A strange flicker of recognition, a subtle tightening of the corners of his mouth, passed over his face before he continued. Maya, too wrapped up in her own misery, didn't notice. She was a statue of humiliation, her mind a frantic loop of Mark's cruel words. Less demanding, a cleaning service, your daughter's embarrassment. The phrases echoed in her head, each one a hammer blow to her already fractured confidence. She felt a burning sensation on her cheeks, a flush of shame that she desperately tried to conceal. Mark, meanwhile, stood straighter, a self-satisfied grin playing on his lips. He was sure the investor was a man, probably one of his old college buddies, someone he could leverage for his own career advancement. He leaned towards a former classmate, a man named Brian, and whispered, "Bet it's a guy from the old Wall Street fraternity. We're all family, after all." Brian nodded conspiratorially, their shared arrogance a tangible bubble around them. They were so confident in their assumptions, in their belief that success belonged exclusively to people who looked and acted just like them. This person's investment was not just financial, Mr. Finch continued, his voice resonating with sincerity. It was a vote of confidence in our company's future, a belief in our talent, and a testament to their own incredible foresight. When every other door was closing, they opened theirs. He paused, a dramatic beat of silence stretching the suspense taut. We owe them everything, and tonight I have the honor of introducing them to you all. Mark, unable to contain his excitement, puffed his chest out even further. He shot a triumphant look at Maya, a silent message. See? This is what real success looks like, the kind you'll never have. His expression was a vicious blend of pity and scorn, a look that had haunted her for years. It was the same look he had given her when she presented her master's thesis, the same look when he walked out on her and their baby girl, claiming he couldn't be burdened with her kind of life. The racism wasn't just in his words. It was in his very posture, his assumptions, and his conviction that a person of her background could never achieve genuine greatness. In his worldview, a black woman's success was either an anomaly or a result of charity, never the product of hard work and intelligence. His casual dismissal of her, rooted in this deeply ingrained prejudice, Mr. Finch's next words shattered the suffocating silence. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my profound honor to introduce the anonymous investor who saved Omnicorp. This individual is not only a brilliant mind, but a visionary who saw potential where others saw only risk. She is a true pioneer. The use of the word she sent a ripple of murmurs through the crowd. Mark's smirk faltered, his brow furrowing in confusion. Brian, next to him, looked equally stunned. A few people glanced over at the small group of women standing by the bar, trying to guess who it could be. Maya was still frozen, the world a distant, muffled hum. She was trying to process the pain of Mark's words, the sting of her public humiliation. She has requested to remain anonymous, Mr. Finch said, but I've managed to convince her to step into the light. The board and I believe her story must be told. She is a woman of immense strength, resilience, and quiet dignity. She embodies everything we hope for in our leaders. And she is someone a few of you might even know. He stepped away from the lectern and extended his hand, beckoning someone forward from the shadows. The suspense was unbearable. Mark's triumphant air had completely deflated, replaced by a look of confusion and disbelief. He glanced at Maya again, a fleeting, almost apologetic look crossing his face, as if for the first time he was seeing her not as a symbol of his failed past, but as a person. The air crackled with unspoken questions. Who was this mystery woman? Could it be one of their own? The possibilities swirled, but no one could have predicted the truth. And in that moment, as the spotlight shifted, Maya remained oblivious, her heart still aching from the pain of a life she felt she had failed to build. The crowd's collective gasp was a sudden, sharp intake of air. The spotlight, a brilliant, focused beam of white, began to sweep across the room. It glided past the polished suits and designer dresses, past Mark's now pale and bewildered face, and landed on Maya. For a second she thought it was a mistake, a cruel joke. She instinctively took a step back, her hand flying to her chest. But the light stayed, holding her in its merciless glow. Mr. Alistair Finch's outstretched hand wasn't pointing to some CEO or socialite. It was pointing directly at her. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice ringing with triumph and a hint of a smile. "Please join me in welcoming the woman who saved Omnicorp, Ms. Maya Davis." The name hung in the air like a thunderclap. Stunned, disbelieving silence fell over the ballroom. Maya's name, the single mother, the laundromat worker, the woman Mark had just publicly shamed. It was impossible. Mark's jaw went slack, his face a grotesque mask of shock and disbelief. He looked at Maya, then back at Mr. Finch, then back at Maya again, as if trying to reconcile the two images in his mind. The woman he had dismissed as a failure, and the woman being celebrated as a hero. Maya felt 1,000 pairs of eyes boring into her. The shame she had felt just moments ago was instantly replaced by a disorienting mix of confusion and fear. "Me?" her mind screamed. "What is happening?" She saw a few faces she recognized from her past, their expressions a mix of awe and utter shock. A woman she had gone to grad school with, who had once sneered at her for taking on part-time jobs, now stared with her mouth agape. Mr. Finch, sensing her hesitation, walked towards her with a warm smile. "Come, Maya, it's time they all know the truth." He took her arm gently and led her to the stage. As she walked, a single memory flashed in her mind, so vivid it felt like it was happening now. It was a cold, lonely night 2 years ago. Her daughter Lily was running a high fever, and Maya's meager savings were almost gone. She was working 3 jobs, but the medical bills and rent were a constant, crushing weight. She sat at her kitchen table, the dim light from the single bulb illuminating a complex series of financial models on her laptop. She had been dabbling in online investments, a passion project she had kept hidden from everyone. She used the knowledge from her engineering degree, the same one Mark had mocked, to create intricate predictive algorithms. She saw patterns in the market that others missed, using complex data analysis and mathematical formulas she had perfected in her spare time. That night, a small, unheard-of tech firm caught her attention. It was Omnicorp. A financial blog she followed hinted at a hostile takeover, and the stock was plummeting. But her models told a different story. They showed a deeply undervalued asset, a series of patents for a revolutionary new software that no one had noticed. It was a long shot, a massive risk. She poured every last cent she had into it, not as a wealthy investor, but as a desperate mother, making a calculated gamble with her and her daughter's future. It was a secret she had guarded fiercely, a last-ditch effort to pull them out of the suffocating cycle of poverty. She had never expected the investment to grow, let alone save a company. Now, standing on the stage, the memory crystallized into a new reality. The hush in the room was not one of judgment, but of astonishment. Mark, standing in the crowd, felt his world tilt on its axis. He had spent years building a life of material success, believing he was superior to Maya in every way. He had based his entire identity on the idea that he was a self-made man who had escaped the mediocrity of his past, a mediocrity he had projected onto her. His racism, his prejudice, his belief that her intellect and ambition were somehow less valid because of her race, now crumbled before his very eyes. The woman he had abandoned, the woman he had called a failure, was not just a success. She was the architect of his company's salvation. This was more than a twist of fate. It was a reckoning. It was the moment her quiet dignity and hidden talent, dismissed and belittled by a world that saw her only for her struggles, were finally revealed for what they truly were. A powerful, brilliant... Mr. Finch's voice boomed over the stunned silence, his hand still on Maya's arm. What many of you don't know is that Maya, with her brilliant mind and relentless spirit, saw our potential when no one else did. She used her own funds, the result of years of tireless work and an incredible knack for data analysis, to invest in us. This wasn't some hedge fund. This was a single, determined individual who believed in us. And a few moments ago, I overheard her husband call her a failure. He shamed her for a life she built with dignity, for working jobs to provide for her daughter, and for having the audacity to be a woman of color with a mind far exceeding his own. The word husband hung in the air, a loaded accusation. Mark, still in a state of shock, flinched as all eyes turned to him. The polite, genteel hum of the reunion had been replaced by a tense, hostile silence. Whispers erupted, and fingers began to point. The man who had been the life of the party, the one who had strutted around with an air of superiority, was now the subject of a collective, humiliating stare. His face, which a moment ago was a mask of arrogance, was now a portrait of sheer terror. Mr. Finch didn't stop there. He looked Mark directly in the eyes. Mark, isn't it? You work for Omnicorp, a company now thriving because of the woman you abandoned, the woman you just told to her face that she was a failure. You claimed she was unsuited for a career in engineering, yet she is a financial genius who saved us all. You ridiculed her for her car, for her jobs, for her life? Tell me, what kind of man belittles the mother of his child, especially when she has achieved what you only dream of? Mark's face flushed a deep crimson. He tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. He looked around wildly, a trapped animal desperate for an escape. The classmates he had been laughing with just minutes before now looked at him with a mixture of pity and revulsion. His best friend, Brian, subtly took a step back, distancing himself from the public spectacle. Mark's carefully constructed facade of success, his narrative of being a self-made man who had left a difficult woman behind, was crumbling in real time. Maya, standing beside Mr. Finch, finally spoke, her voice steady and clear, cutting through the heavy air. Mark, she said, her words carrying the weight of years of silent pain. You always told me my success was a fluke, that I was only hired for my engineering degree because of diversity quotas. You said I was too much, because my ambitions made you feel small. But the truth is, my worth was never defined by a paycheck or by what you thought of me. It was defined by my hard work and my belief in myself. The raw emotion in her voice was a testament to the years she had spent in the shadows. This was not an act of revenge, but a reclaiming of her narrative. She was no longer the shamed single mother. She was a woman who had endured, who had fought, and who had won. The full scope of Mark's cruelty and his deep-seated prejudice was laid bare for everyone to see. His humiliation was complete. The climax of the story wasn't just about Mark being exposed as a fraud. It was about the public revelation of the racism that had fueled his actions. It wasn't just a personal failing. It was a systemic one, a reflection of the prejudiced views that had always held Maya back in Mark's eyes. His disdain for her was rooted in the belief that a woman of color could never possess the intellect and drive to truly succeed on her own terms. But Maya's quiet brilliance, her hidden talent, had not only defied his expectations, it had financially and reputationally devastated him. Mark, unable to bear the weight of 1,000 judging eyes, turned and stumbled toward the exit. He didn't run. He walked with the slow, defeated gait of a man who had just lost everything. He was a symbol of his own hypocrisy, a man who had built his life on the foundation of another's perceived failure, only to find that the foundation was built on sand. The grand ballroom, once a stage for his arrogance, had become the theater of his public disgrace. As he disappeared into the night, the crowd's whispers turned into an applause, a slow, building ovation for the woman who had truly earned it. Maya stood on the stage, the applause a warm, resounding wave that washed over her. It wasn't the sound of pity or even just surprise. It was the sound of recognition. The respect she had worked so hard for, the dignity she had clung to through years of hardship, was finally hers. Mr. Finch smiled at her, a look of genuine admiration in his eyes. He had offered to keep her anonymity, but she had chosen this moment, this public stage, to reclaim her story. She had endured the shame, and now she would own the victory. As the ovation began to die down, Mr. Finch offered her a proposal that would change her life forever. Maya, we need your mind. We need your insight. We need your unique way of seeing the market. I'd like to offer you the position of Chief Strategy Officer at Omnicorp. You wouldn't just be a consultant, you'd be at the very top, helping us navigate the future. It's a full partnership, with a salary and a stake in the company that reflects your worth. The offer was more than a job. It was a testament to her talent, a validation of every struggle, every late night, and every tear. It was a new life, a future she had only dared to dream of for her daughter. She thought of Lily, of the small, cramped apartment, of the faded toys, and the promise she had made to give her everything. This wasn't just for her, it was for them. A tear, this time of pure, unadulterated joy, finally escaped and rolled down her cheek. Later that night, as the party wound down, Maya found herself surrounded by people who had once ignored or dismissed her. Former classmates, now humbled and impressed, approached her with awkward apologies and fumbling compliments. They spoke of her brilliance, her resilience, her unbelievable success. She accepted their words with grace, a quiet smile on her face. Their past prejudices, the microaggressions, the condescending attitudes, they were all a part of a past she was finally putting behind her. The next day, Maya and Lily stood in the lobby of a new apartment building. sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. It wasn't just an apartment. It was a home. A place where Lily could have her own room, where Maya wouldn't have to work 3 jobs to make ends meet, where the ghost of poverty couldn't follow them. Lily ran ahead, her laughter echoing in the spacious sunlit room. She held a key in her hand, the key to their new life. Maya watched her, a profound sense of peace settling over her. She had built this from nothing. She had used her intellect, her resilience, and her quiet strength to overcome not just financial hardship, but the deeply ingrained prejudice of a world that had tried to put her in a box. Her success wasn't just a personal triumph. It was a powerful statement against racism and discrimination. It was proof that talent, when nurtured and believed in, would always find a way to shine. Maya's story was no longer one of abandonment and humiliation. It was a story of a woman who was underestimated, not just by her ex-husband, but by a society that often judges people by the color of their skin and the size of their wallet. She had risen above it all, not by becoming like them, but by staying true to herself. She had used the mind her father had told her was a key, and she had unlocked a door she never thought possible. Her dignity was not given to her. She had earned it, one hard-fought day at a time. And now, she and her daughter were walking into a future as bright and limitless as the